Mathieu van der Poel again with such a distance to go.
At a race as hard as this, to see what Mathieu van der Poel did, listen to me. Stop. I'm speechless.
Look at van der Poel going from behind now. Look at van der Poel on the left hand side. Mathieu van der Poel's going to do it. Mathieu van der Poel.
The race that made Mathieu van der Poel a household name in road cycling was Amstel Gold Race, a race that may as well be a monument with the amount of history and glory surrounding the race. It's one of the longest and toughest one-day races on the calendar, and it kickstarts one of the toughest weeks of racing with La Flèche-Wallonne and Liege Bastogne Liege following. Over 256 kilometers of tough racing in the Limburg region of Netherlands. You'll struggle to find a flat section in all of the race, and if you do, it's most likely got a headwind. Steep climbs like the Kruisberg and Kouberg litter the course. Small little leg snapping climbs that in isolation aren't so tough, but when you've been racing full on all day, they hurt a lot. In recent years, they've changed the location of the finish line. Rather than the race finishing at the top of the climb, they now have added a long flat stretch afterwards, which leads to very exciting racing. It's a race that's been won by legends such as Gilbert, Vinokurov and Bjarne Riis, but it's also a race that lends itself to surprises. Enrico Gasparotto and Michael Valgren have both stood atop of the podium, where you wouldn't have guessed it at the start of the day. Amstel Gold Race is the pride and joy of Netherlands. Sponsored by the region's beer, aptly named Amstel Gold. The winner gets a massive boot filled with Amstel Gold's finest. It had been over 20 years ago that spring that a Dutch rider had the pleasure of drinking the beer on the top step of the podium. Legend Eric Dekker won the race in 2001 in front of none other than Lance Armstrong.
No, he's not. He's given up. Dekker has got it.
That was about to change with the introduction of Mathieu van der Poel. Today he's a household name. He's held the yellow jersey in the Tour de France and he's been world champion. But in 2019, he was first and foremost known for his cyclocross skills, racing for a tiny team, Corendon Circus. Him and arch rival Wout van Aert had already started making noise in 2018 and 19. Mathieu van der Poel entered the race as one of the pre-race favourites, but he was going up against teams with much bigger budgets. In particular, Julian Alaphilippe was flying, having won Strade Bianche and Milano-San Remo earlier in the year. He would be the man to beat. And all it took to beat him is arguably the best finish in modern day cycling history. On the morning of the race, Van der Poel plays Fortnite, seeming calm and relaxed. The 24-year-old is getting in the zone for the race, tuning out all distractions. The briefing on the bus in the morning is clear: save energy and position yourself well. However, Mathieu has other plans.
So what kind of scenario can you imagine for today's race? Last year the fight started quite far from the finish, as you like. Well, I think it could be great for me if the battle starts a bit earlier and we can arrive in the final climbs with a nice group of riders. So we'll see you attacking early? Maybe.
After 200 kilometers of racing, Mathieu van der Poel kicks off in daring fashion, attacking with over 40 kilometers to go. On the Golperberg climb, he produces the highest 1-minute power we've ever seen at 757 watts, peaking at 1,221 watts, after having raced 215 kilometers. This is like Usain Bolt running a marathon, but in the middle of that marathon he runs a 9:58 100-meter split. He's clearly got strong legs, but it's a big risk to go this early. He knows he needs to isolate the other favourites, so they can't rely on their teams with much bigger budgets. Needless to say, no one wanted to follow him. However, cycling is a team sport. Alaphilippe's team is the equivalent of a Premier League team, whereas Mathieu van der Poel's team is in the Championship. Alaphilippe and the other captains set their lieutenants on the front and catch Mathieu 5 kilometers later. Knowing that Mathieu will be reeling from this monstrous attack, Julian Alaphilippe attacks on the Iser Bausek with 37 kilometers to go, and it's only his rival Jakob Fuglsang who can hang on. The next 35 kilometers of the race bore a large resemblance to another classic one-day race earlier in the year, Strade Bianche, the race of the white roads. Not only does that race go up and down, they also race on tough Italian gravel roads. Julian Alaphilippe and Fuglsang had gotten a gap and worked together to keep Wout van Aert at bay. However, in the end, Alaphilippe got the better of him. This move now in Amstel Gold Race could go all the way. We'd already seen it earlier in the year.
When we went away that he had to pull and this time I should win instead of him. It didn't work out. He didn't agree, so now we ended up third and fourth.
The next 30 kilometers fly by in a flash. Meanwhile, Mathieu sits in a smaller group over a minute back with 6 kilometers to go. General cycling consensus is that 1 minute of race time equals 10 kilometers. By those standards, Mathieu's race was over. No way he'd make it back. However, Mathieu is an outlier. He comes from a family of strong cyclists. His grandfather, Raymond Poulidor, one of the best racers ever to never win the Tour de France. His father is Adrien van der Poel, who in 1990 won this exact race, the Amstel Gold Race. A race he had no business winning, racing on the same climbs that they do today. In the end, it was coming down to a bunch sprint. The two riders in the front looked certain to take the win. Adrien sprints from so far back that Luc Rosen thought he had won the race and almost started celebrating. Determination runs through the Van der Poel family, and this race carries a special emotional bond. So with 6 kilometers to go, Mathieu realizes that no one else in this group is strong enough to bring them back. He kicks into gear. It's all or nothing. He goes to the front and ups the pace massively, putting out 600 watts, not caring who's getting a free tow behind him. Simon Clark, who was on his wheel, said this: "Mathieu van der Poel proved that day that he wanted the victory more than anyone else." Meanwhile, in the front of the race, Julian Alaphilippe and Jakob Fuglsang start to play cat and mouse. Fuglsang, having lost early in the year, stops taking turns and forces Alaphilippe to do most of the heavy lifting. This takes the pace out of the group completely. The gap is tumbling. As the camera pans back on the final kilometer straight, you see Kwiatkowski bridging to the front duo. The group behind is not working together, but you can spot Mathieu loading up for one final push in fifth wheel. The camera pans back to the front again, but when it comes back one final time, Mathieu is all of a sudden on the front. He looks back 4 times and zigzags across the road to catch up to the front. He starts to sprint just before catching the front, and here he goes for it.
This is incredible! I have never, ever seen anything like this in my life! Mathieu van der Poel has done it!
I've seen a lot of bike races. I've seen a lot of bike racers. I've never seen anything like this, ever.
The cycling world is in ecstasy. We've just witnessed history. In the final sprint, he averaged 849 watts and peaked at 1,199 watts. This is after 260 kilometers of racing. Most of it was full gas. We know this because Mathieu uploaded the full ride to Strava with his power data attached, something you don't often see from pro cyclists.
I mean, it must have been such an amazing race to watch on TV this year.
When Schachmann describes a sprint, he says it was like hanging onto a freight train.
Yeah, like they came back and Van der Poel, he started a super hard sprint pretty early. I just went into his slipstream, tried to go full gas to find something in my legs. And yeah, he passed and I think he couldn't believe it. I saw him. Super strong, congrats to him.
Mathieu's win was so incredible that the region decided to name the finishing straight after him. Even British cycling royalty Bradley Wiggins had this to say about him.
He is the hottest property in cycling at the moment, other than Alaphilippe. It's scary to think what he might actually achieve by the time he's Gilbert's age.
Mathieu van der Poel has gone on to win many more races after the Amstel Gold Race, but this will forever be remembered as the one who put him firmly on the map and put him on the trajectory of legends. If you enjoyed this video, please do click the subscribe button below. It only takes a second, but it helps out the channel massively.